Good afternoon, all. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the City of Santa Rosa Design Review Board. What day is it? Is it still Thursday? And it is the 20th of February. So welcome, everybody. Patty, may I have a roll call, please?
Let the record reflect that all board members are present.
Thank you, Patty. And on to item number 2, approval of the minutes. We have before us the minutes of February 6, 2020, regular meeting. Anybody have any additions, comments?
I'm just reading about board comments to keep in mind things. Oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to understand how as a board and it's a noble thing to say, keep in mind the human scale and draw the human scale throughout the project. It's kind of a tough, it's kind of an intangible, I don't know quite what I would do with that, but just a note in the future, maybe, whether we're talking about awnings there or things that clear your head or whatever. It's just one of those
For clarification.
That was a note about prioritizing the pedestrian and bike access rather than the large boulevards. So, you know, but the gist of it was the human scale, but human scale is a,
so it's not getting run over. It's being able to cross a street that's not 50 feet across, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Having huge boulevards and tall buildings, but remember that it's a neighborhood, so there's a better way to say it. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, Warren.
I think it's fair enough, yeah. Anything else? Okay, we'll go ahead and put those into the record. Thank you. Item number 3, board business. This is where I read the statement of purpose for this board versus other boards and commissions within the city. Project review. The review authority shall consider the location, design, site plan configuration, and the overall effect of the proposed project upon surrounding properties and the city in general. Review shall be conducted by comparing the proposed project to the general plan, any applicable specific plan, applicable zoning code standards and requirements, consistency of the project within the city's design guidelines, architectural criteria for special areas, and other applicable city requirements, i.e. city policy statements or development plans. So that's this board's purview. At this time, I would like to open up for public comment, any items not on today's agenda. If you're here to comment on today's item, we'll have that later. Any items for the purview of this board not on today's agenda? Seeing no one approach the microphone, we'll close that public comment period. Item number 5 is statement of abstentions by board members. Do we have any abstentions today? Seeing everyone sitting here and ready to perform, I see no abstentions. Scheduled items, we have one scheduled item today. It is a major design review for the Travel Lodge at 1815 Santa Rosa Avenue, file number DR19002. And we have planner Kristen A. Tumans to make a presentation for us, followed by the applicant, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chair Kincaid and members of the Design Review Board. I'm Kristen A. Tumians, Senior Planner, and the project that we'll discuss today is the Travel Lodge at 1815 Santa Rosa Avenue. Ordinarily, this project, because it's in a priority development area, would have been a minor design review going before the ZA with a concept design review before the DRB. But given some of the potentially historic nature of the property and the prominence of the location, the project was elevated to full design review board with acceptance from the applicant as well. The applicant is requesting to remodel the exterior facade of the hotel, the Travel Lodge, and the changes include establishing a contemporary color palette, addition of stone veneer along the base, and a lighter aluminum horizontal slat screen, accentuating the existing fin with a band of LED strip lighting, and re-landscaping the planting areas with water-efficient landscaping. Here's the project location outlined in the light blue. The project site is located along a busy and established commercial corridor surrounded by various commercial uses and large shopping centers. To the north, there's a tire and automotive service business. To the south is Rosa Vista Trailer Park, which also wraps around the western boundary of the project site. To the east is Santa Rosa Avenue, additional lodging facilities, Santa Rosa Marketplace with the Costco Shopping Center. And to the west, we have predominantly Highway 101. This is a street view of the existing project location, showing the project face on Santa Rosa Avenue. It's currently developed with a 10,770 square foot hotel lodging facility with parking and amenity areas, and it's just under an acre. This is the view looking west, directly across from the Wendy's. Here's a view looking south. You can see the prominent fin projecting out of the main office. Here's a little bit closer look that shows the existing sign and landscaping. And here's looking north, and you can see a little bit of the Rosa Vista Trailer Park up against the hotel. You can see the area is predominantly zoned for retail and general retail, with the exception of the mobile home park just south of the project site. This is the existing site plan. There is no planned expansions with this proposal. The applicant plans on a new drop-off area, which includes a new roof extension, which the architect states will better connect the building to a guest's arrival. And there will be new walkways to comply with modern ADA paths of travel. Here are the existing elevations, and I highlighted the north elevation with slightly rosy hue, showing where the roof extension is proposed in the next slide. You can still see the fin, prominent fin in the front. Here are the proposed elevations with the new stone veneer and aluminum cladding. The fin remains, and there's a new color scheme throughout the elevations. Here's a close-up of the front office building with the fin. And the existing building has a prominent fin design popular in the 50s. And the applicant is proposing to keep the fin and enhance it with LED strip lighting. And as I mentioned, there's proposed stone veneer and horizontal slat screen. This was part of the late correspondence that was sent to you around 11:30 this morning, and it's the proposed landscape plan. It shows the proposed plantings in front of the main building along Santa Rosa Avenue. And these are the colors and materials that the applicant proposes. And as far as historic preservation, a structure may be historically significant if it meets any one of the criteria. It is already listed on the California Register of Historic Resources. It is a local register of historic resources, or it's over 50 years of age. In this case, the building's over 50 years of age. It's not listed in the it's not in a preservation district, nor is it a landmark. And our records reflect that the facility was constructed around 1953, and any additional permit records are very sparse. And so the significance stems solely from the age of the building. The applicant submitted a historic resource evaluation that was prepared by a historic architect. That's part of your packet, one of the attachments. And his report concludes that the building is not eligible as a cultural resource, nor does it have any historic significance. The applicant will retain the original use and materials of the building. Additional finishes will be sympathetic to the era of the building, and the proposed work will maintain integrity of location, design, setting materials, workmanship, feeling, and association. With that, the proposed project has been reviewed in compliance with CEQA and has been found to qualify for a Class 1 exemption, in that the project is limited to exterior and interior alterations, and there's negligible expansion of the use. And as of today, there are no unresolved issues, and we haven't heard it from anyone from the public concerned about this project. And with that, the Planning Division recommends approval of the Travel Lodge major exterior remodel. The applicant is here as well as his designers, if you have questions about the architecture, and staff is here if you have any questions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is there applicant presentation or just here to answer questions?
Just answer questions.
Okay, perfect. So just for questions. So I guess we'll bring it back to the board and ask any questions you have of staff or the applicant. Maybe we'll start at the other end this time. Adam, can we start with you today?
Sure. Just right off the bat, who did the landscape plan?
That was myself. I'm Michael Cannon with Coast Landscape. It's a preliminary design more.
I think we'll ask you to come maybe closer to the microphone, and as if you've got an answer to one of the questions that are asked, if you could approach the microphone, because this is being recorded and it's on televised. So thank you.
My name is Mike Cannon with Coast Landscape Management, and I prepared the design. It's more of a preliminary design, but I can answer any questions you may have.
No, that's great. Was just wondering who actually did it, so thank you. That's all.
Thanks, Adam. Drew? Brett? I'm so used to going that way. Yeah. Brett?
Is this for both staff and whomever? So question for staff, I guess, is I noticed that there's a few areas of, I guess, landscaping that's being taken out as part of this and being paved. And at what level does this trigger a, are there, basically we're introducing additional impermeable area. And so I know, there's probably, I understand probably why it's happening, but as a feature and as a buffer and as a threshold from parking to these units, I'm just curious, at what level, what square footage triggers this, I guess, understanding of the drainage and, again, increasing impermeable area, but also as I guess a feature of the original design and intent and things like that. What implications are there?
So 10,000 square feet is the threshold for when a more detailed stormwater evaluation has to be performed for the project. This didn't meet that threshold, and our engineering division issued a pretty standard condition in the Exhibit A, and they didn't seem to have concerns about the increased impervious surface.
Okay, and then maybe for the applicant, if just the rationale behind the removal of those areas, because it's, it's, I guess in terms of, being at hotels or using facilities like this, it's a nice edge treatment and buffer.
Hi, my name is Vimal Sharma. I'm the GM on the hotel, and the reason that we are asking for the additional parking is that we are actually lacking enough parking for the guest units. We are 31 guest rooms, and over the course of the years, adding more and more handicap accessible spots removed regular parking spots. So we actually started to fall short where customers did not have parking when they were staying at the hotel. So they would actually have to park along the lawn side, and they didn't feel safe that their cars would be hit, while exiting or entering the driveway. So that's why we propose that we would add additional parking for the guest.
Okay, I guess it's just for me, it's just the buffer, so between the railing and the actual parking stall. So it doesn't, are you just making the argument that by elongating these, so do we have is there like a pointer?
If I read the plans correctly, you're adding 1, 2, 3, 4 parking spaces up towards the landscaped area, in which case you need more backup room for the other parking spaces, so you push those forward, or?
Sorry, I didn't get that. The 4 parking spots the current parking spots that you're seeing there, or?
Is all that parking that we're seeing right now currently there?
Oh yeah, that's all currently there, yeah.
Okay.
No, that's already currently there.
Okay.
Sorry.
You can use the mic if you want here and point.
I guess I'm curious about, it's all of these spaces here, so these are existing,
Yes,
and so all of these are being filled in per the note. All of these landscape areas are being filled in with concrete.
right, correct.
And
and you're asking about the buffer?
Yeah, just why I think I know the answer, but why why do that, I guess?
So the reason that I wanted the plans that we have there, what's happening is that it's causing a lot of spiders and wasps to nest there, and we've been getting a lot of guest complaints. So what we figured we'd do is we would actually go ahead and put concrete over there, and instead we would put potted plants by some of the poles. So we would still have, the greenery would still be there, but we wouldn't have the issue of the wasp and the spiders getting into the rooms and around the property.
Okay, so I guess if you're just going to be putting plants back in place in a pot, I understand.
Right, they're going to be in a pot.
But the plant's still there.
Yeah, there's still going to be plants there. It's just going to be, they're going to be potted, and so they're not elongated entirely in the hotel. So we could kind of control it better.
Okay. And then I guess my other comments were just around, it looks like on the preliminary landscape plan, there's still the central, and then maybe this is another question, because of the renovation, and I assume that the square footage is over 2,500 square feet you're modifying 2,500 square feet or more of landscape area, and that, that triggers the WUCL's requirements and things like that for irrigation, but the sod is still being left in the center aisle. Are there any plans to maybe bring the sides in to that area as well? I guess when I'm thinking of places like the Sandman Hotel and the Astra Hotel, who have done some really nice things with their frontage, albeit limited space, even 2-foot or 18-inch wide planters. They've done some really nice things with, removing the little bits of lawn that they had, or emphasizing, the features that you're putting on this building now and kind of the renovation of the building. So it's just, if it's possible to remove, I don't think having that piece of sod in the middle is going to meet the WUCL's requirement, but maybe that's something for the city and permitting to kind of figure out, but.
Not completely, we don't really care about the sod. We can definitely change it if that, if it is an issue. We also have people who have pets at the hotel, so we wanted to keep a grassy area so they can take their pets out. That's the only reason we left that little bit of grass area there. But if it's an issue, we can always remove it and just continue the same landscaping plan that we have on the other lawn areas, or current lawn areas.
Yeah, no, the point's well taken about, dogs and having amenities for folks and things like that. And now I see actually those 4 parking spaces are going to be in that center aisle, is that right? So,
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we're getting rid of majority of the sod. We're just keeping it right around the signage area.
So that's in there.
I can't quite see from
Yeah, anyway. Yeah, they come in. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I would just, I guess, encourage that frontage to kind of have the same treatment, and in terms of like the plant choices, if there's something, you know, it's obviously up to you all, but like something a bit more edgy or fun, especially with the type of building that you have and kind of harkening back to the 50s and that time. But yeah, the Astro and Sandman both did a really good job with how they treated, and Flamingo as well. And Flamingo is of this era as well. So those are my only comments, I guess, or questions.
Thank you, Brett. Eric?
No questions.
Thanks, Eric. All right, Drew, you're up.
My question would be for the applicant, probably the architect. On the floor plans, there are 3 windows shown on the north elevation and the east elevation, but yet they are missing from the east elevation and the north elevation on the revised drawings. They're on the second floor. So they're shown in the bathroom. Looks like the bathroom and kind of maybe the guest room there. They're missing. You want to point here? You got it. Yeah, so there's 1 window shown there and a bathroom. Nope, not that one, on the right side. And then there's 3 windows shown there that are missing, that are called out to be infilled. One missing there. Yeah.
Good afternoon, my name is Josh Divelbus. I'm the architect on the project. Those windows were removed as a part of the interior improvements. The proposed layout of the guest room was revised. And so basically the facade was updated to match the function of the floor plan.
That's what yeah, I mean, the windows are shown in the floor plan, but not in the elevation. I don't see how they affect the layout of the floor plan, really, I guess. So that's why I was asking, because they seem to be in spots that don't affect the layout. So I'm wondering why they're being removed or being touched at all.
Can you?
Because the reason why I ask is because the historic architect's report says something differently, right? It says you're not doing anything to the windows, and yet your plans say differently. So that's a critical, because I guess my question to staff would be, this isn't a CEQA thing for us, but kind of is, kind of isn't. Sorry, I've got like a stream of consciousness, I apologize. We'll come back to the windows once I get the answer from staff.
Yeah, I don't think it is it's not a CEQA issue per se, but it's a consideration for sure. So I think that I guess my question would be back to you. I don't know if you got your answer that you were asking, I'm sensing.
So, I mean, we're not making a determination in the sense from an entitlement standpoint, granting an additional component. It's really just the use permit or the design review component. So there's no other action or element, really, correct?
Well, design review has a CEQA component to it.
Yeah, exactly.
So we need to make sure that you're consistent with CEQA, and the approach we're taking is that it's exempt because there's no impact to a resource. The age does give it a component that requires a review, hence the report. So we need to make sure that what is in the report is consistent with any actions that you take. And so my question wasn't if I answered the question. My question was, did you get your answer from the architect?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So maybe if the
Kick it back to them.
project architect wouldn't mind maybe trying to respond to that question, or maybe
But does my
do you
question
need
make sense?
clarification?
There's a disconnect between your plan set, the historic architect's review, right? They're disconnected right now. And then there's a disconnect within your plan set. And I imagine you probably made a change at the last minute to the elevations or something, so.
But what you're also saying, though, is that the corner water closet, the corner glass, is actually, there's no interior modifications that would prohibit the corner glass.
Leaving it in place.
Leaving it in place is not a compromise to the plan. It actually illuminates the room.
Correct, yes. So I don't see why you would need to remove the windows at all. So maybe you can address that.
And from a graphic standpoint, could you pull up the sheet A6 and put it on the screen? Part of the plan set, I think that would help.
Yeah, if you have like the enlarged second floor plan, might help, I think. Right, Henry?
Yeah, it's in our package under, it's one of the attachments, attachment number 4, plans.
Page 6.
Yeah.
While they're pouring out, could you guys talk to why the change, why the removal of the windows, et cetera?
So I believe that the window that you're talking about, which was the one on the right-hand side, the big one, that one on the plans would be actually right above where I believe the toilet would sit. So basically when the person's on the toilet, they would have that huge 2-foot by 3-foot window behind their head. That's, I think, one of the, I believe that's why we had removed that window, because it is in the bathroom and it is a big window, and the fact that it was right above the toilet.
Chris and how we doing on
It might take us a moment to actually,
Okay.
we're
Those
pulling it
are
from
my
a different
only
file.
questions, so while we pull it up, we can kick it down the line here.
Sounds good. Henry, questions?
Yeah, for staff, I'm curious in the sign ordinance, is there something for restoration of historic signage? Or, I know kind of how the sign ordinance reads is 1 square foot per lineal foot of frontage. Is that the only hard, fast way for an applicant working with a historic project? And I'm kind of thinking back in my memory on stuff that we did at Coddingtown with the big Coddingtown sign, and I'm sure Astro Motel, there's the big Astro that's written vertically. I'm sure that their total sign package somewhat.
Montgomery Village had a beckoning to the past.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering if there's an avenue for us to comment on maybe making the gesture to the applicant that they do some restoration on the signage, on the fin in particular.
So I'm not aware of any specific code regulation regarding historic signs for projects that are not in a historic district. So it is the square footage that you mentioned, that's the standard code requirement for signage. We do have a sign variance. We modified that a few years ago to allow for more square footage and the findings to be based on design rather than land use findings. The Coddingtown sign, the spinning sign, that's actually a city landmark. So even though it's not in an historic district, that sign does have landmark status, so that's why it's special. And the only other time signs come before the board and there's some, the board has some purview related to signs is not necessarily the sign itself, but it's when the sign exceeds the height of the parapet or roof line of a building. So then if the sign is on a fin or something like that, then what the board would have to say is that that is an architectural feature of the building and that that's an appropriate placement for the sign. So other than that, the design review board doesn't have purview over signs.
Thank you. That's it.
Warren, any questions for staff or the applicant?
I think we've, there's been questions given, but I don't really have anything to add right now to the proceedings.
Okay, thank you. Yep, Drew, we're back to you. We've got the floor plan up on the screen.
So I think what both Henry and I were looking at are these two windows here, this little guy here, and then the larger window in the front as well. So obviously these two windows would, if kept, or if removed, I should say, would remove all glazing from this guest unit, right? And this window, if removed, would remove north glazing from the bathroom. And this window, if removed, would, you know, affect the frontage on Santa Rosa Ave, and I think we understand the fact that this is a large-esque window, but you could address, you know, the Heine-Heider component, if you will, with frosted glass or something of that nature, and still maintain the fenestration. So does that make more sense, the question that we're asking?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, Drew. And I have no questions. So I'll, again, bring it back to the board for, public comment. Thank you. At this time, I would like to open up this item for public comment. Are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none, I will close public comment. Thank you for the reminder. And now I'll bring it back to the board, and we will talk about possibly considering a motion for approval with further discussion.
I'd like to make a motion approving the project with the caveat that the historic nature of the building, there's a fluted glass, which is quite beautiful. It's a kind of a rib glass, and that is a way to blur images of people undressed. I'd like to also have a consideration because of the excellence of the signage in its original 1953 place with that fin, it's what it's for. I like consideration in the motion to look at that sign, maybe with LED lighting or something, but something handsome on the fin, and forego the sign on the ground. You get to see from 19 blocks away the fin. And I do have one other item of consideration. These columns, if you go back to A4, thank you. Right, okay, A4, the north elevation, there's a series of columns in front of that black door. You can kind of, there's a kind of a teeter-tottery effect of those columns flying right up into the under softening. It seems like some kind of a lintel, something structural to help some horizontal, whether it's 9 inches or something, but just a return so that those columns appear to be more fortified, more in line with how the framing might work. It would be the returns and the face, so it could be stucco, but just considering that. And that is my motion. I don't have anything right now on the whole concrete landscape situation because plans are limited here. I'm acknowledging in consideration about these planters and car stalls and what is going to be buffering bumpers and headlights from the sidewalk and the motions. That is a consideration. In fact, when the rain falls off the roof, oftentimes these planters historically were the catchment, creating early sump fortitude. So those are my considerations.
Okay, we've got a motion with some conditions. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Henry. And comments. Drew, we'll start with you this time.
Well, Warren was going to say everything I was going to say, pretty much. The one thing I would add, because is this little chunk of missing, whatever, the aluminum grills. I think it'd be nice to reinforce that corner with it.
Do a wraparound?
And then here, yeah, because it just kind of looks out of place, because you're not doing it over here. I mean, if it was a deliberate kind of corner reveal on both sides and was balanced, I think it would fit the character a little bit more, but here it just feels kind of empty, and then back here as well to kind of round it out. But that would be it. Add the windows back, fluted glass, signage. I think I like the LED light strip. I think it's kind of funky and cool. It's kind of like what Astro did as well, like Brett was saying. So I think, you know, adding an actual travel lodge signage up here that was retro would be really slick, and then you can get rid of your kind of not so impressive sign in the grass, potentially. Those are my comments. And normally we ask the applicant, like at the end, when we go through our comments, if any of them are feasible or whatever, and we determine whether it's shall or consider. Like, so it shall is we make you do it, consider is think about it, if it works, great, if there's a budget issue, you know, that kind of thing. So that's, we normally work it out with you, what works best for you. So we'll do that at the end.
Thank you, Drew. Henry?
Yeah, I'm in support of the motion, and obviously I seconded it, but I've got one, maybe it goes back to a question of the applicant. It doesn't, sorry, this is an expansion of the existing entry element, is that correct? Okay, good. And I'd like to see this beefed up and either have a header element to it, since you're expanding it and working with it anyway. I see the existing photograph, how you hid the header on that existing piece is was some fine trickery, but since you're reworking it, I'd like to see some thickness to that the columns are supporting, besides just a little teeny hat at that entry element. Adding back in the glass, I think, is really important. I found a suite, almost looks like a postcard, but it's a picture from the 1950s of the hotel as it existed, and that fin, I always thought that fin was a parapet that allowed this additional square footage to the building. And it was just a firewall. So with no signage on it, it makes no sense to me architecturally. I think the original design was always intended for that to be signage. And so I went on the internet, which is a great tool these days, to find some history on it, and was looking for the guy with the bear and the long sleepy shirt costume. I thought that might have been what was up there, but it actually just says the script Travelodge on it. So if there's a way to get that back, I think it'd be a nice retrofit to the project. Those are my comments.
Thanks, Henry. Warren, further comments? No? Adam?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and the plans. Yeah, I appreciate all of the considerations that you're doing with the building and the materials. I think that's, I like the update to the materials themselves. I think it's a nice refresh of what's there, but still respecting what was there. I do think that Henry's point about adding the signage would be really great. Could be, you know, to utilize what you've got. I do have some concerns with the exterior, treatment of the exterior of the building and the site itself. It seems, I mean, you know, I think us getting the landscape plan today at 11:30 is potentially indicative of how you're thinking of the exterior and the site itself, that it's kind of tacked on at the end. There are a number of design guidelines that we as a board are tasked with taking a look at, and landscaping and site improvements and respecting the site are part of that as well. 3.3-5, providing barriers to protect pedestrians throughout sites is a really important area. You've got a nice crosswalk and going across the parking lot, and that's good. But 3.3.8 is providing buffers and trees for shade. And trees are a very important part of what the city of Santa Rosa really wants to have in their sites and in their general streetscapes. Orchard parking is a great way to do that too. One of the things with this site is that you have this massive expanse of the parking lot, which, you know, I guess in some senses that respects the history of the site because it's Travel Lodge, it's automotive and car-centric. But as Brett was mentioning with some of the updates to other sites and hotels around town, there are ways to rethink treatments of sites rather than just focusing on the building itself and maximizing the structure and getting people in and out with their cars, to actually to use the site as an asset and to rethink that a bit. So I think that some more thought could go into that. You have the large central courtyard. I know it's definitely a concern or a thought to think about some turf for dogs and people, you know, they're driving through and they have their pets. That's definitely, you know, a great way to have an amenity for them. Another of the design guidelines is to have no more than 40% of the landscape area be turf, which, you know, with taking out some of the turf, I think you're helping that, but this is one of those areas where if we had gotten a more complete landscape plan with actual, you know, I do appreciate what was given. The hand drawing is great. You know, you've got a conceptual plan, but it is very conceptual. Whereas we're supposed to be looking at, you know, you've got the very definitive architectural plan, but then a very sketchy landscape plan. If we have ways to actually, to have more complete plans and plan sets as a way to talk about your design rationale and what you're trying to think and what the ideas you're trying to get across. And so, yeah, we don't know really what the square footage of the landscape area is, or square footage of the parking areas. Then I'm not really certain of what the square footage of the concrete planters is as well. So with the site, I feel that one, taking out the existing plants that you've got in front of the buildings would be inadvisable. And I think that the comments about spiders and wasps definitely, you know, concern, but that's more of a maintenance issue and choice of plants. You can do. You can have other treatments if you're having a problem with one certain plant or a treatment. It's like kind of like if you have, you know, a problem with cleaning a wall covering or a carpet or something like that. You can always switch out the material, rethink what you're doing there, rather than concrete over everything. It's introducing a lot of impermeable surface. Warren mentioned the rain coming down. It actually is providing that infiltration and the buffer. And so I think that I would strongly recommend not concreting over those areas, because that then gets to more of our design guidelines of providing the buffers, softening the streetscape. Providing special attention to the incorporation of trees in all landscape design. There is only one tree on the site, and it's an existing tree, and they're not adding in any other ones. Granted, it is, you know, Santa Rosa Ave. It's pretty industrial along there and commercial, but I think it's a missed opportunity that you could actually add some enhancements to the streetscape going past, and then bringing that into your site as well. Potentially, you know, thinking of a way to breaking up the parking, orchard parking, you know, potentially some traffic islands that are in there or something to break up this massive expanse of pavement. Thinking of multiple things of water infiltration, urban heat island effect. This is a huge area where it's just a sink of solar heat that's coming in. So that could potentially, having some cover could decrease some of your heating or your cooling costs. And also for people that have been on the road all day, it's nice to kind of get away from pavement and be around some natural amenity. And so, yeah, that is guideline 8, 4.1-2, where it's breaking up large expanses of paving to visually separate masses of parked cars and to provide a shade canopy. Those planting areas within paved areas should be a minimum of 5 feet wide. That last part is not there. I think there's you could add some tree canopy to your plantings. I wouldn't mask any of your nice new treatments to the building that you're doing to your signage. But thinking about adding trees into here, definitely doing away with that concreting over of the planting areas that you got. These small strips are the only ones you have. Might as well not get rid of them. And do some creative rethinking of some kind of plant material that you can do, permeable surfaces. You've got landscape. I know Coast does good work. They can definitely come up with some really innovative, thoughtful ideas for you to think about that. So use them as a resource. I would like to see more softening of the streetscape and the paved areas, and to be bringing in some of those design guidelines as well. So, thanks.
Thank you, Adam. Brett?
I think Adam and Warren said everything that I wanted to say, so I won't reiterate on a number of those. I especially liked Adam's comment about basically the enhancements coming from the street into the site as well. And so and I know that there's a additional 6 parking spaces, it looks like, in that existing lawn area out front, and maybe giving up a couple of those in favor of an additional seating area or something next to that tree, like you talked about with the dogs and things like that. It doesn't have to be lawn. It could be still a permeable surface, like a decomposed granite or gravel that you could take throughout the site and use as mulch as well. And I think, echo Warren's comment again about the planting at the threshold. I would hate to see that go, and maybe that's just a livening up or a sprucing up of that with contemporary plantings and evergreens that still provide that buffer. And then the only other thing I would add on the screening or add to the landscape frontage is screening of the existing trash enclosure. It looks like there's some plants, planting plan already kind of around it, but Chondropetalum is, it's 3 feet tall. It's not, really going to give you the screening that you may want of a somewhat undesirable, privacy fence, privacy slat fence enclosure. And my last comment would be just, the approach, I think, with the river cobbles and kind of meandering things, it's great if they serve a function, but maybe it's something that's a little, the next approach is something that's a little more commercial and refined and not quite as, residential in character or swoop or feel, given the kind of hard lines and edges of this architecture itself. So those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Brett. Eric?
No comments.
Thank you, Eric. I guess another question leading out of these comments that I've been hearing. So this originally could have gone to the zoning administrator, was elevated to the design review board because of the historical context of the structure itself. And then we got a landscape plan late, and we've got a massive very relevant landscape comments. So we could start getting into, well, gee, you know, the trash enclosure is supposed to have a roof on it and drainage and a hose bib. And I mean, I guess looking for some direction as to the parameter of what we're looking at.
Yeah, that's a great question. We were actually just discussing this. I think what staff would hope is that the board could give some deference where it's appropriate to the applicant team, to staff, to implement those through conditions of approval. Some of those can probably be standard conditions of approval, particularly given the fact that this normally would go at the minor level, which is often a simpler packet. They did agree to come here. It was at the direction of staff for the purposes that have been outlined. So I think we would hope for some way to work through these issues and resolve them here at this meeting.
All right.
I have a question.
Drew,
yeah, kind of in line with that. I think our brains might have been spinning the same wheel. I'm curious from the applicant, from the comments that you heard from regarding landscape, do those feel to you like what is being asked is potentially cost prohibitive for you to even kind of address some of the other elements that we've kind of talked about today? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the ideas that were pitched forward as far as changing what is in the existing like planters, or the not covering it up with concrete and just keeping it away and changing the plants, I actually like that idea, and that would be something that I consider, and I don't see that being financially, I think it might be actually better.
Okay. Because the thing that I was thinking about is I think what we've asked kind of architecturally is potentially a cost savings, because you're not building a new wall, you're keeping the existing windows, right? And the thing that I kind of was scratching my head a little bit is I understand the parking component need, but I understand where the landscape architects down there are coming from in terms of you add more impervious paving, you get more runoff, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm wondering if there's, you kind of horse trade a little bit, right? So you're no longer ripping up all your plants and filling them with concrete. So there's a cost there that you're no longer incurring. And then you're adding parking spaces, which sounds like it's beneficial for your business model and for your clients to have the actual, 31 spaces for 31 units or whatever, right? I think I counted, there's 31 spaces now, but you've got 2 ADAs, and so, and you have to add another ADA. So there's a lot kind of associated with that. Could you take that, those 6 spaces and just do those in a pervious paving kind of element? That way we're not adding impervious asphalt, you're adding kind of impervious. I don't know if there's a cost difference. It's something you may have to talk about, but I think maybe we could give some direction, consider perhaps to staff. That way that gives you the flexibility to go back to your site concrete guy or your site work guy and say, hey, what's the cost difference between just flat out paving this, doing 4 spaces, 6 spaces, what if we do it this way? And then instead of trying to kind of really address the whole frontage, because obviously when we look at this image from history, for instance, there weren't trees, there weren't lots of large bushes, and I think from a historical context element, you're actually improving upon what was originally designed in the 50s in a way by doing a very small scale landscape element. And so that I think would be my kind of opinion, is to kind of give you the flexibility as the owner to kind of try to do as much as you can with kind of like probably the funds or the budget that you've developed, and stay within, kind of keep the historical context, but also kind of maybe try to check a couple other little boxes. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. And then the only thing I would want to add I'd want to add a condition that whenever this goes back to staff, that landscape and architectural site plan need to match.
I don't even know if do we have a site plan other than the original?
Yeah, we do. It doesn't include the new spaces and stuff, so it just needs to all match up. That way, make it easy for staff to go to rubber stamp it for you.
And then my only other question to staff about how to handle the signage component above the roof line. Do we need to make a finding that the fin is an architectural element and therefore signage would be appropriate?
I think you said it accurately, exactly.
Oh, and Chair Kincaid, I believe the applicant maybe had a question regarding the signage earlier. So you had a question?
So originally you had proposed to add a sign to the fin but remove the bottom sign. Would it be okay if we kept the bottom sign and still were able to add a sign on top?
That's
Just
probably
the reason is that driving down the street, I always wanted to put a sign up there. It was always my idea too, but I know at some points when you have larger trees down the street and other people's signage coming in out into the way or and stuff, it kind of blocks part of that, so that way the visibility would still be there.
Bill.
Yeah, so back to what I mentioned earlier, the purview that this board has is only relative to the fin, and if a sign were to go on that portion of the fin that's above the roof line or the parapet, then the finding has to be that it is an architectural feature. And actually, while we're talking, I'm gonna ask Christine to find that language in the code for me so I can read that into the record. It's an actual finding that has to be inserted, so we'll get that for you. As far as the rest of the signs go, that would be a purview of the board, but I would alert the applicants to know that there are sign requirements in terms of the height of the actual sign, the square footage of the signage itself, and so anything you propose would have to be reviewed against those, evaluated. And as I mentioned, there is a variance option for an exception, and it is related to design, but again, that would be something that's done at the staff level, not here at the board.
I think for me, regarding my comment about the sign in the planning area, is I just felt like, hey, if you're gonna put it on the fin, you can get rid of the smaller one. But obviously I think the small one on the ground is up to you, is what it sounds like to me. I've got no preference one way or it was more of a suggestion. Hey, if you got this nice one on the fin, get rid of the one on the ground.
And then my only other question to the board from a comment perspective is we talked about signage up on the fin above the roof line, and are we talking about it being on both sides and illuminated, not illuminated? I mean, I don't think we need to necessarily say it has to be illuminated, but I think if we don't want it illuminated, we should say no illumination.
I think it would meet the period to be illuminated, personally, with neon to match the, or LED or whatever. I think it would match the period of when the building was built, and it might have actually very well been neon at the time, in all honesty. So hard to tell from the photo here, but it probably would have been neon.
You stand out letters, you can backlight floating letters. That's just as tasteful. The true neon is a real strike in that. But at least backfloating LED is pretty inexpensive.
And both sides of the fin?
Yeah, and I think we could defer to your architect to determine what was, the most cost-effective solution for you if you wanted to backlight it or do true kind of neon, like an old-school neon sign.
My guess is it would have been on both sides of the fin too, and I'd like to see it on both sides of the fin, northbound and southbound.
Bill, I think under Santa Rosa City Code, Chapter 20-38 is the description of all the signs, and I'm not sure that our conversation is matching any of the codes for that in regards to illumination, sign requirements, setbacks, et cetera. So I would say it'd be staff that would to look at that.
For the illumination.
Yeah, there's the illumination, the size of the sign according to the building as well. Is there?
The sign, the allowance for allowable signage, it has to do with the building frontage, primary and secondary frontage. There's a calculation. But as I mentioned, I don't know, I'd say routinely, but we have done a number of sign variances when it's appropriate to have more square footage. So there is a pathway to achieve that. And we pulled up the actual language from the code regarding roof signs, so I'll just read it into the record. No sign shall be installed upon, against, or directly above a roof or on top of or above the parapet of a building, exception, if found by the Design Review Board to qualify as an architectural element designed in conjunction with the building architecture. The provisions of this subsection shall not apply. So what we would do is, if the board pleases and would like to go this route, give some discretion to the applicant to put a sign up above the parapet, then we would put this in as an additional finding, indicating that that fin is an architectural feature and a sign could be placed on that.
It would be my inclination to do that, and with the specific proviso that, you know, we could maybe qualify it that the original, you know, design had signage in that location, therefore it's somewhat historically relevant to include the architectural feature in that location. If that makes sense.
I think that only bolsters the argument.
Yeah.
And a comma and a little minor add to that is that it's done in the same sort of script and the sort of the historical look of the Travelodge, not the bright blue and white. So what I would do is we should ask the applicant, sometimes script can be trademark, can be logo, so we want to make sure that that's something that's available to them or not.
So
It's one L for
I saw that, yes. The only thing is that Travelodge is now owned by Wyndham Hotel Group, and they have actually just rolled out a new registered trademark with saying that Travelodge by Wyndham. So we actually have till the end of the year to abide by that, where we have to actually change out our signage to reflect what their current logo is.
Can you do that on the monument sign on the ground, on lower, and then let this be an architectural element, which is what we're giving you the avenue to put that at?
I would definitely talk to Travelodge and, you know, let them, you know, see what they say, and basically allow me to do that. It would be, I'd do it. I'd have no problem. It's just, I don't want them to say, well, you can't do this anymore because according to our agreement that you have to follow these current signage agreements.
I'm wondering, Scott, then if we maybe, the signage component is really a consider, not a shall, then gives them the flexibility to kind of pursue it with the direction that it is this certain way to qualify as an architectural element. And then if for whatever, if Wyndham comes down and slaps your hand and says, no, you can't do this, then you can say, well, okay, well, I don't have to do it per the conditions of approval. And then the only thing that would be left would be the modification of your monument sign, which would go through the regular pathway, which is we're not privy to.
One other thought, when we've done these in the past, often what happens is an applicant will present a proposal that shows where the sign will go, and the board will have some idea of the square footage proportionately, how big that area will be. Does the board have any feedback on that? Because like I've mentioned, they might come back, and if all their signs in total exceed the square footage, they would have to get a variance. And I'm just concerned that the board is clearly giving some direction that there's a preference to see some appropriately scaled and designed and appropriate scripted sign on the fin. But I want to make sure that, because it likely wouldn't come back to you, that sign wouldn't be something that the board doesn't anticipate ultimately. So perhaps if there's a square footage, a proportionate amount that the board thinks is appropriate, that would provide staff and the applicant more direction going forward.
Do we have any measurements of what the historic signage would be? I mean, that can we reference the historic signage and say within the footprint of the circa 1950s?
Yeah, I think based on the information we have and the drawings and the photograph that board member Wicks brought in, I think we could get to a kind of a reasonable proportionate area, so that would be helpful.
Okay.
I'm gonna try to measure it in Acrobat right now, see if I can help you out.
I just Googled the Travelodge by Wyndham logo. It's very similar to Travelodge, but it says by Wyndham down below, so.
That's the thing now, that they want it to say by Wyndham, and it has to say by Wyndham.
Yeah, and so my question to the board would be if it said Travelodge in the architectural script-ish way and said by Wyndham below it, would that throw it out the window as acceptable? Because I think that's where they'll go with you. That's just my opinion. So I think there's a desire from the board to have the signage above it, and if you're going to keep the context of the original structure and the historical nature of it, that but it's modernized because things change.
I mean, pretty much your hands are tied to whatever Wyndham says, correct? Sure. So
when it comes to their logo, they tell us the font, the exact color, and how much spacing needs to be around it. Everything is to the T for them, and they basically give us a template of their logo, and we have to use that for all signages. Whether it's on a business card or the building, it has to be to their specifications because it's their logo.
It's somewhat of an oblique angle, but we pull it up. It's in the street view. You can see the Travelodge sign as it is currently. It doesn't say by Wyndham, but I'm looking at the same Google images. It's essentially it's a similar text in smaller font, just below Travelodge. It says by Wyndham.
So the approximate square footage of the historic sign, based on the elevations drawn by the architect, appear to be 8 feet by 3 feet. That makes sense. So 24 square feet, if I did my math right.
Yeah, so that'd be very helpful if the board would like a condition that asks the applicant to consider a 3 by 8 area above the parapet on the fin that would be acceptable for a sign in this particular script. That's a very clear direction for us. And I would like to consider to use the script of the Travelodge from the 50s. Just ask Wyndham if that would be acceptable, and then the B option would be to modernize that to the current Travelodge.
did you say that they are going back to the retro script by the end of the year?
By the end of the year, the current signage we have where it says just Travelodge has to be changed to Travelodge with the by Wyndham underneath. It's the logo and everything stays the same. It's just going to have the words by Wyndham underneath there.
Mm-hmm. I mean, is there, Is it, I think, because the sort of key components of the script are the T and the L. Is there even a potential because I would rather see the retro script than the modern script up above. And so is there a way that, would it?
I was going to say that, I would pitch it to them that, hey, we want to go with the T and the L, and still say Travelodge, but of course we're going to keep the by Wyndham sign as a main illuminated sign, monument sign, but we're just going to go with the retro look, and just for the style and the look of it, we're going to go with the retro style. And that's what I would propose to them.
Trademark thing. Yeah. And would that affect our preference if it's just the T and the L elements rather than the full travel?
I think, so my preference is that I think using retro signage is what makes it an architecturally significant element.
Agreed.
If you were to do the modern Travelodge by Wyndham logo, I don't think it's architecturally significant from a historical standpoint. Now, obviously, I think Henry and I, it sounds like, if you're agreeing with me, I would prefer the full Travelodge, the original 1950s logo. And if for whatever reason that doesn't work, option B would be, I think, the T and the L. And then if you can't get the retro thing to work with Wyndham, then I would just not do the signage, because I think it is no longer an architecturally significant element at that point. So it's either go all the way, go halfway if you can with the T and the L, or don't do it at all.
Yeah, because at that point it's just more modern signage, which,
And it's not architecturally
Don't necessarily
significant.
need-
It's like, you know, slapping up a sign on the highway, kind of, sort of, with the modern signage. I think what's unique about this is because the original building had that, it's significant historically to how that fin was in operation at the time. So that's what's significant about it, and that's why it gives you the opportunity to reinforce that as you kind of modernize and retroize your hotel to give it some more flair. And I think that it's nice that we have that ability to, you know, give you an exception to the no signage on a building above the parapet roll to kind of return it to its former glory, if you will.
Okay, I've got a number of items here, so I'll go down the list, and so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna talk to the board about what items we feel should be shall, which would be incorporated into your plan, and some things that would be consider, and then after we're done with our part, we'll say, is that workable for you, okay? So the items that I have, you know, as shall keep the fenestration on the north and east two-story office element. Shall keep the planting areas in front of the lodging units. Those are the only two shalls I have. So the rest of them I have consider, so chime in if you want them to be shalls.
The only thing I would say on the window piece is I think to give the applicant flexibility, but also kind of respond to Warren's comment, is shall keep windows in place, replace glass with obscure glass, preferably period-specific fluted. But then that if they can't find the fluted, it's too much money, it's whatever, they could put a film on the glass and call it a day. You know, that just gives them the flexibility to try to find the right glass, but also Warren's direction in terms of the period-specific glass, I think, is relevant.
So we could add,
I think that's consistent with the motion that's on the table too that Warren made.
right, yeah. And so how about if we break it up into the second part of that is consider fluted glass relevant to the period. Perfect. You're gonna have to help me with this one, Warren. Consider returns at the column elements to.
Yeah, it'd be the header. Consider face and return.
Warren, can we get you on the microphone?
I'm sorry.
Thanks.
Okay, I got it. Consider header and return elements at the columns on the canopy.
Yes. There was, speaking of returns, there was the wraparound that.
Yeah, I got that next.
Okay, thanks.
Consider wrapping the northeast corner with the horizontal element and carry it to the west of the entry door.
I think Henry and I are both saying that should be a shall.
It's fine with me. Shall wrap the northeast corner with the horizontal element and carry it to the west of the entry door. Consider enhancing the landscape elements. Consider tree plantings for shade canopies. Consider seating in the landscape elements. Consider screening the trash enclosure with taller landscape elements. Consider permeable areas in place of the new paving at the new parking spaces. It's wide open. And then let's deal with the signage. So the board finds that in certain contexts, the fin element and signage on it is architectural in nature.
So I think what I was hearing is there's a specific dimensional area, 3 by 8.
Yep.
That, do you want to give it a try, Drew?
Yeah, you want me to give it a whirl here? on the signage?
I was gonna hit the 3x8 and the T and the L and the script, but go for it.
Well,
You sure?
by all means.
I'm good.
I was just gonna say that,
Not proud.
just to make it easy, consider signage on the fin. Board finds it to be historically architecturally significant. I think that's important, historically architecturally significant, because that further reinforces the case. And then you can do the bit about the signage, the script, and the whatever, and the T&L. You got that, on both sides.
Yep. So the element, signage element itself would be no more than 3x8 feet. And would have two options for the script that we would find acceptable and architecturally significant. Either full script for the 1950s era script per the photograph that architect Henry Wicks and board member brought forth. And if the full script is not acceptable, then the option B would be just the T and the L of Travel Lodge in the historical script. And if neither of those are deemed acceptable by the franchise ownership, then there would be no signage on the fin. And the signage would carry on both sides of the fin if it's installed.
And it would be lit. Backlit preferably.
And it would be,
That's what I think.
backlit I think would be appropriate, backlit.
Warren had a term for it, yes.
You can just say illuminated.
Illuminated,
There's different ways to do that.
Sure.
And the signage should be illuminated, preferably backlit. Did I miss anybody's shalls or considers?
We'll need a, yeah, we should make sure the applicant's okay with it if they are friendly. You got it.
Yeah, okay. Does the applicant find those shalls and considers doable within your plan?
Yes.
Thank you for your flexibility. And we need a friendly amendment to the motion to add said items.
I friendly amend the motion as Chair Kincaid so eloquently read.
Thank you, Chair Waggle. Does the motioner accept the friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment accepted.
Does the second accept the friendly amendment?
I do.
Excellent. Patty, may I have a roll call, please?
Board members Sharon,
Aye.
Kortenbrock,
Aye.
Goldschlag,
Aye.
Weigel,
Aye.
Wicks,
Aye.
Hedgepeth,
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye. And thank you for improving the city. I think it's a great task ahead of you, and best of success, and appreciate your flexibility. Thank you. Okay, let me get back to my agenda here. Item number 7, board member reports. Do we have any board member reports this evening? Seeing none, I bet item number 8 is department reports. Do we have any department reports?
Nothing in particular, but since I do have you all here, I'm thinking it's been a while since we've had one of our get-togethers. We got through the holidays and New Year's, and so I'm wondering maybe a quick straw poll, maybe a show of hands. Is everyone up for that? If so, we can start to look for. I got everyone.
Hands are
everyone.
shown.
7-0, unanimous. So maybe I'll start to look for a place. We'll do it after one of our design review board meetings coming up, maybe when we don't have too long of an agenda. So be on the lookout for that, and maybe Chair Kincaid, you and I we can discuss further, find a location.
Sounds excellent. Appreciate it.
What kind of heads up will we have for the date with that? Just
We'll give you as much as possible, but it'll be after one of the DRB meetings. Like I said, a lighter agenda, but even before that agenda goes out, I'll take a poll and see if we can find a place that's good for everyone.
yeah, that'd be great. Just to arrange childcare. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I wanted to thank the board as well for working through this item. It was a different challenge than we normally face. So thanks to staff for elevating it, and for the board working through it and getting something that was acceptable to the applicant. So thank you.
I would second that also. This was very helpful, and I appreciate the flexibilities, particularly that this was a minor item that we decided to elevate. So thank you, and the comments were really helpful.
And with that, we are adjourned.